Hi, peace lovers. It's December, and I'm still practicing my Kitty Compost voice. For these last couple of weeks of the year, I've gathered 17 holiday inspired public domain readings from writers like L. Frank Baum, Henry David Thoreau, and Charles Dickens. It's a bit quirky, I know, but so is Kitty, and so is the new Peace podcast series arriving right here on New Year's Day, the Peace Experiments, Experiment Zero. A humming government facility, a skeptical fact-checking goat, and a classroom full of teens collide when reporter Kitty Compost begins investigating the myths that keep peace just out of reach. The peace experiments explore what happens when young people finally ask the questions adults avoid. And perhaps you've been hearing the Next Peacelands here on the podcast. We'll be returning soon to the practice of holding peaceful intention for the specific war zones and the countries that supply weapons to them. But during this stretch of Kitty Reed's Holiday Lit for Peace, the Next Peacelands will simply offer the names of some of the spiritual organizations working quietly and steadily for peace. You can add your own peace intentions to their hopeful rivers of peace if you choose to stay through the end of this episode. As always, the creative books and projects I make for peace can be found at aviskalfsbeek.com, and the music for the Next Peacelands comes from the talented Javier Peque Rodriguez. For a printable list of all Kitty's holiday readings with links to the full texts, visit aviskalfsbeek.com/holiday or see the show notes. Joy and peace to you and yours and to the world. Now over to Kitty. Today's reading comes from Edith Wharton, the first woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction and one of the keenest social observers America ever produced. Born into old New York society, Wharton grew up in rooms where manners, secrets, and expectations did most of the talking. She learned early how a community can shape a person's fate, not just with rules laid down in newspapers, but with the quieter codes that live in human rooms and parlor doors. Wharton wrote with a reporter's clarity. She cared less about ornament and more about truth, how people justify their choices, how love and status collide, and how a single decision can echo across a lifetime. Her work shows us that society isn't an abstract idea. It's built day by day in the way folks treat each other when nobody's looking. New Year's Day, the 70s, is part of her collection Old New York, where she recreates the moral climate of earlier decades with near forensic detail. This story turns the holiday into a lens. New Year's Day becomes a moment of exposure where appearances slip and the private cost of someone's reputation finally comes into view. Wharton isn't handing out judgment. She's inviting us to think about how communities decide what and who they're willing to forgive. We'll read just a short portion today, enough to feel her steady intelligence at work and to notice how a holiday can show the truth of a whole year if you're paying close attention. And well, honey, I could read the pencil date off an old invitation card if it helped us remember that beginnings and endings share the same doorway. Sometimes a story like this asks us to look at what we carry into a new year, especially when nobody, for goodness sake, is holding a gosh darn gun. Following is an excerpt from New Year's Day, the 70s, by Edith Wharton. She was bad always. They used to meet at the Fifth Avenue Hotel, said my mother, as if the scene of the offense added to the guilt of the couple whose past she was revealing. Her spectacles slanted on her knitting. She dropped the words in a hiss that might have singed the snowy baby blanket which engaged her indefatigable fingers. It was typical of my mother to be always employed in benevolent actions when she uttered uncharitable words. They used to meet at the Fifth Avenue Hotel. How the precision of the phrase characterized my old New York. A generation later, people would have said in reporting an affair such as Lizzie Halsedine's with Henry Prest, they met in hotels. And today, who but a few superannuated spinsters still feeding on the venom secreted in their youth would take any interest in the tracing of such topographies? Life has become too telegraphic for curiosity to linger on any given point in a sentimental relation, as old Sillerton Jackson, in response to my mother, grumbled through his perfect china set, Fifth Avenue Hotel. They might meet in the middle of Fifth Avenue nowadays for all that anybody cares. But what a flood of light in my mother's tart phrase had suddenly focused on an unremarked incident of my boyhood. The Fifth Avenue Hotel, Mrs. Hazeldine and Henry Prest. The conjunction of these names had arrested her darting talk on a single point of my memory, as a searchlight suddenly checked in its gyrations is held motionless when one notes each of the unnaturally sharp and lustrous images it picks out. At the time I was a boy of 12, at home from school for the holidays. My mother's mother, Grandmama Parrott, still lived in the house in West 23rd Street, which Grandpapa had built in his pioneering youth, in days when people shuddered at the perils of living north of Union Square, days that Grandmama and my parents looked back to with such a joking incredulity as the years passed and the new houses advanced steadily parkward, outstripping the 30th Streets, taking Reservoir at a bound, and leaving us in what in my school days was already a dullish backwater between aristocracy to the south and money to the north. Even then, fashion moved quickly in New York, and my infantile memory barely reached back to the time when Grandmama in lace lappets and creaking moire used to receive on New Year's Day, supported by her handsome married daughters. As for old Sillerton Jackson, who once a social custom had dropped into disuse, always affected never to have observed it, he stoutly maintained that the New Year's Day ceremonial had never been taken seriously except among families of Dutch descent, and that was why Mrs. Henry van der Luden had clung to it in a reluctant, half-apologetic way long after her friends had closed their doors on the 1st of January, and the date had been chosen for those out-of-town parties which are so often used as a pretext for absence when the unfashionable are celebrating their rites. Grandmama, of course, no longer received, but it would have seemed to her an exceedingly odd thing to go out of town in winter, especially now that the New York houses were luxuriously warmed by the new hot air furnaces and searchingly illuminated by gas chandeliers. No, thank you. No country winters for the chill-blamed generation of prunella sandals and low-necked sarcenet, the generation brought up in unwarmed and unlit houses and shipped off to die in Italy when they proved unequal to the struggle of living in New York. Therefore, Grandmama, like most of her contemporaries, remained in town on the 1st of January and marked the day by a family reunion, a kind of supplementary Christmas, though to us juniors the absence of presents and plum pudding made it but a pale and moon-like reflection of the feast. Still, the day was welcome as a lawful pretext for overeating, dawdling, and looking out the window, a Dutch habit still extensively practiced in the best New York circles. On the day in question, however, we had not yet placed ourselves behind the plate glass, whence it would presently be so amusing to observe the funny gentlemen who trotted about, their evening ties hardly concealed behind their overcoat collars, darting in and out of chocolate-colored house fronts on their sacramental round of calls. We were still engaged in placidly digesting around the ravaged luncheon table when a servant dashed in to say that the Fifth Avenue Hotel was on fire. Oh, then the fun began, and what fun it was, for Grandmama's house was just opposite the noble edifice of white marble which I associated with such deep pile carpets and such a rich, sultry smell of anthracite and coffee whenever I was bidden to step across for a messenger boy or to buy the evening paper for my elders. The hotel, for all its sober state, was no longer fashionable. No one in my memory had ever known anyone who went there. It was frequented by politicians and Westerners, two classes of citizens whom my mother's intonation always seemed to deprive of their vote by ranking them with illiterates and criminals. But for that very reason, there was all the more fun to be expected from the calamity in question. For had we not with infinite amusement watched the arrival that morning of monumental floral pieces and towering frosted cakes for the New Year's Day reception across the way? The event was a communal one. All the ladies who were the hotel's guests were to receive together in the densely lace-curtained and heavily chandeliered public parlors, and gentlemen with long hair, imperials, and white gloves had been hastening since 2 o'clock to the scene of revelry. And now, thanks to the opportune conflagration, we were going to have the excitement not only of seeing the fire brigade in action, supreme joy of the New York youngster, but of witnessing the flight of the ladies and the visitors, staggering out through the smoke in gala array. The idea that the fire might be dangerous did not mar these pleasing expectations. The house was solidly built. New York's invincible brigade was already at the door in a glare of polished brass, coruscating helmets and horses shining like table silver, and my tall cousin, Hubert Wesson, dashing across at the first alarm, had promptly returned to say that all risk was over, though the two lower floors were so full of smoke and water that the lodgers, in some confusion, were being transported to other hotels. How then could a small boy see in the event anything but an unlimited lark? Thank you for listening and allowing me to practice Kitty's reporting voice for the big story ahead. Now stay with me a few minutes longer if you're able for the Next Peacelands. Following is a special holiday edition of the Next Peacelands, where we pause on listing the war zones and weapons suppliers. Instead, we rest our intention of peace on a few of the spiritual organizations working tirelessly toward peace. While this list is far from comprehensive, the total number of organizations, large and small, would number in the thousands if we included all who work daily for peace. I ask that you consider taking this time to add your own intention of peace to those working daily toward that goal. Mennonite Central Committee. Peace is here. Community of Santa Hidio. Peace is here. The Network for Religious and Traditional Peacemakers. Peace is here. Religions for Peace. Peace is here. Pax Christi International. Peace is here. American Friends Service Committee. Peace is here. Lutheran Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. The International Fellowship of Reconciliation. Peace is here. Baptist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Community Peacemaker Teams. Peace is here. Episcopal Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Friends Peace Teams. Peace is here. Muslim Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Buddhist Peace Fellowship. Peace is here. Quaker Peace and Social Witness. Peace is here. Network of Christian Peace Organizations. Peace is here. Network of Spiritual Progressives. Peace is here. United Religions Initiative. Peace is here. The Christian Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament. Peace is here. Agape International Spiritual Center. Peace is here.